at a quick overview of what it is that is included with these three areas of list formatting. We've got column formatting. Now that's this area here on the left. And it gives us the ability to do single column formatting. So you think about just the individual column. You're going to override things like the styling, the content right? The content of your list is never going to change by way of list formatting. The look and feel and the display content may change, but the actual content living in your list won't be affected by list formatting. And to some degree, the functionality, and we'll explain what that means. We're not necessarily adding in JavaScript, but we can take plain text data and sort of transform it into being something interactive by the users. Now, view formatting, that's where we're going to override the entire row. So if we had our rows of lists, right, that is where we're going to override that look and feel. Instead of affecting an individual column, we're going to take everything in that row and override how it looks and feels. And it's going to give us the same degree of control, functionality to a degree, content of the entire list or row, and the styling. Now, form formatting, this is one of the exciting siblings that is more recent. It's going to give us the ability to change when we're filling out or editing new or existing content. And we'll see where this is applicable. We're able to do some fairly basic formatting that allows us to hide fields. Now, we could always override that with a Power App, but in some cases that might feel like it's overkill and there's just simple things that we need to do. And so we would be able to take advantage of that now, and we'll show you how to do that. Now, all of that sounds great, but we are picture-based creatures, right? We like to know what it looks like. So this is a quick glimpse of some of the examples that we'll look at today. Here we've got just the simple out-of-the-box list format or list experience, right? We've got basic information. It's familiar to us. This is the days of classic. We've got our columns and information in our columns. What would column formatting look like? Well, that's taking something that's in the content, right? So here we've got Twitter, and this is maybe familiar to you, some of these names, but they're just basic Twitter handles. And we're going to take and now pull in data that allows us to enhance that individual column. So now what we've done is we've called out to Twitter, and instead of just simply displaying the name, we've actually got the Twitter profile picture and are displaying that. Now the content behind the scenes, again, hasn't changed, still just these values. We're just changing that presentation layer for our users, so it's a little bit more engaging. Now, view formatting, this is where we take that entire row, as you can see here, and we're overwriting it and displaying it in a much more enhanced way of representing that data. And we'll talk about all these elements. All this information is coming from the same list, so we're able to take advantage of that. So let's start with column formatting. What makes it unique? Well, it has two flavors along with it, and actually view formatting also has two flavors now, but we'll focus on the first flavor of the wizard-like experience for mainly column formatting, because that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck. So there is a wizard-like experience, so you don't have to write any of that JSON. We'll talk more about that again. It's got limited control. You can only kind of wizardify so many options. Microsoft has done a really good job. They've continued to invest in it. And we see in advancements in the number of areas that you can actually use the wizard to enhance your list experience. But it is still limited control, right? And the different types of options that are available to you are based on the data type of the column. So some of the choices are things like date, choice, yes, no, Boolean. Others, the different types of options that are available to you through that wizard is dependent on that data type. Now, if we want to take that above and beyond just what is available to us in the wizard, then we've got this advanced mode, which is called JSON, and that stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's really nothing more than just a hierarchical kind of like an outline, if you will, of specific terms that identify how it should look. If you're comfortable with something like CSS, or HTML, it'll look familiar to you, but it'll use more curly braces. And it's not to be afraid of. They provide templates for you to use. So when you build all of these custom formatted experiences using the wizard, you can switch over to advanced mode and see what Microsoft built. So it's kind of like a learning process, a tutorial as well. But there's also a whole host of other samples that are available to you through the Patterns of Practice community that we'll talk about at the end. Now, column formatting, that's where we specifically will use that low code, that JSON, where we can write everything ourselves. It gives us more control Things you can do are like referencing other column content, which we'll see. It allows you to change that styling. It will allow Excel-like expressions. So all of us at some point or time have used Excel and are likely familiar and comfortable with some degree of an Excel expression. They're not real difficult. And so you can do calculations, comparative calculations, mathematical calculations, and you can, to some degree, create faux functionality. And what do we mean by that? Well, like the Twitter handle, it's very repeatable. So for example, we could take that. We know that the Twitter URL structure is very repeatable in that you have twitter.com/username. Well, we can construct a hyperlink based on those kinds of rules that we know are consistent. So we'll see what that looks like as well. So let's dive directly into a demo of all that so that you can see it live and in living color. What we have here is just a basic list. There's no custom formatting being assigned here, but what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how we can apply some of that custom formatting. We're going to start with column formatting. And to engage in a column formatting, you just simply click on the header here and you come down to column settings and you select format this column. So that option right there is where you would be able to engage. And what it'll do is it'll fly out on the right the column formatting pane, and it'll display, excuse me, it'll display for you the different custom formatting wizard options. So you can kind of see here, it sees that that's a date field. So it's saying things like format date, conditional formatting. You can click on that and right immediately it's done some degree of formatting. You can click edit styles, and then you can see here that you can say if date is before, you can adjust that to a specific date. If date is today, again, the same, and if it's after, et cetera, et cetera. Over, excuse me, over here, you can adjust the individual styles for each of those. So you have options like choosing the fill colors. You can also go into more styles. And these are the types of examples of things that weren't always available immediately when list formatting came out. So it's a good example of the continued investment that Microsoft is making when and where a wizard is applicable and makes sense. And so you can do things like adding an icon, right? If it's after today, what is this? It's after today, then we want it to show up as, you know, an up arrow, or if it's before or something like that, we can change the icon color. So we could come in and change that to white if we wanted to show up, add some borders, and you can kind of see where we're going here. We could bold the text if we needed it to stand out a little bit more. Basic functionality, but certainly things that go a long way in terms of that information. One of the questions in the chat was, can you sort by formatting? I'm not quite sure what you mean by sort by formatting. You can sort. You can adjust the formatting in the advanced mode, and we'll talk about that. Sort by color. Okay, I see. I'm not quite sure if you can sort by color, but you could adjust the sorting in the same logic that you're going to apply to the color. You could probably adjust a sort to that, and when you adjust the sort, then your colors are probably grouped together, but you can get creative there. Okay, so you can see here as we go about, I'll save that, and then we'll go into the choice and say format. Oops, I'll format this column, and that's one of the new features that still gets me, is you can actually just adjust between columns there. And you can see here now the choices have changed, right? So based on the different data type, it's giving different wizard options. Pills are certainly those newer options that are a little more popular, and you get that same more styles opportunity that we see here. So we can come in and we can adjust that information. We can add some borders. Doesn't really look as good on a rounded corner pill, but we can certainly adjust that as we want. Text color, etc. And we have that option here. So certainly some welcome opportunities. Now, when we save that and we go back to style, and you can see down here on the bottom, it says advanced mode. And that's where we talked about being able to go in and use the system to help teach us about the different options that and the ways in which the definitions can be created. So you can see what we've done is based on everything we identified in the wizard, right, which we could switch back to. at any time. If we switch back to the advanced, then we see what's been created for us. And we could use this as a kind of a guide and a learning opportunity to see what is available to us. We could also kind of always look, if you're familiar with the JSON construct and you wanted to dig a little deeper, you can look at what's called the schema. And that's always sometimes representable of what you can do, and sometimes actually shows more than what's already been documented. So if you're kind of comfortable peeking at the wizard behind the curtain, then that's an opportunity that you can do there as well. And it kind of gives you a sneak peek of things that maybe have been rolled out, but like I said, not yet documented. Now, if you do make changes here that aren't supported by the wizard, and then you click back to switch to design mode, you can see here there's a little warning: the formatting JSON will be discarded. So it means you kind of lose, because the wizard can't understand every possible change we've made. So you would lose that. But this is a great way to do that. But what we really want to start doing is looking at how we can take advantage of the full breadth of the architecture that's available to us. The wizard is a fantastic opportunity for us to be able to start building some basic and simple formatting. But what we'd really like to do is see where we could step it up a notch. So I'm going to move over to this particular list. And what we have here, as I zoom in, is just two basic columns, just showing a number difference between before and after. And it certainly would be nice to be able to maybe condense that to a single column, the after perhaps, and call it something else based on the current, maybe the current quarter or week or whatever it is we're comparing, and be able to know, well, okay, this is the after value, but really, how has it changed? Has it gone up or down? What's the representation there? So we're going to dive into the column formatting, and instead of using the initial wizards, we're just going to dive directly into the advanced. So we see we've kind of got a blank canvas, if you will, here. And what I'm going to use is just a bunch of samples that are all available. We'll talk about in the end, available for you for free. And they're pretty basic. And so if I kind of pull over my my VS Code here, you can start to see that some of them start extremely small. Right. So, I mean, we're talking about only 19 lines of theoretical code. Again, it's not functional like JavaScript or anything. And some of this is broken out because we're being very verbose in our bracing mechanism in terms of display. But it's really not that long. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that and we're going to paste it into here, and we're going to hit preview. And now what we've done is we started out by doing some comparative logic. So we're saying, okay, well, if the previous number is a greater, then we want to show an up arrow, and we want it to be green, assuming that up is better in the organization or the particular comparison we're making. Now, we may want to know if it's going down, right? And in this case, we are going to make it red and show a down icon. So that's some additional information that is of value to us immediately. But what if we wanted to know a little bit more? Right? So what if we want to know, well, we really need to know what the difference is. Well, that's where having some mathematical calculations is available to us. And we're really just doing some simple addition and subtraction, right? So I pasted some information in here. You can see that we're just doing some very basic addition and subtraction to be able to see that information. So if I hit preview, now we're not only able to see what's changed, we're able to see by how much. So in this case, it's gone up by 5, so we're showing +5. Again, we're still able to color it and able to show whether it's gone up or down in conjunction with the icon. So pretty valuable, basic examples of what we can do within the scope of some comparative logic, conditional logic, and mathematical logic. So I'm going to hit save on that. We're going to now look at some of those more graphical experiences that we can use to enhance the look and feel of our lists. So we're going to go back to our list of social profiles here, and we're going to focus on that Twitter icon like we saw in the screen snippet. So as I mentioned, Twitter is a very repeatable pattern in its URL architecture and structure. So we can absolutely skip over the basic mode here, and we're going to go directly into advanced mode. And you can make calls out to other services, whether it be a website that's hosting a bunch of images, Twitter, or some API to Twitter, where it's repeatable to be able to grab back some images. So I'm going to do that here. I'm going to pull over a a definition, and I'm going to paste it in. You can see things are getting a little longer, but we're still only at 31. And we're simply looking at, their value, and we're taking this little guy right here, which is current field, is just a token that represents the value that is sitting here in the column. So when we look at current field, then we are simply looking at the current value, and we're grabbing that, and we're going to wrap that in some image tags, right? So we see Elm type image tag, and we're now able to pull that back in. So when I hit preview on that, what it's done is it's gone out and grabbed all those URLs. And to take it a step further, we could even include some information like, where am I at? My title and alt tags, right? So we see that that's pulling back that same current field. And so that means what we're able to do is highlight or hover over that and still see the value. Now, we could always just display the value if we wanted to, but in this case, it's a little bit more engaging. We're visual creatures. We tend to identify more with imagery and photographs than words. It's faster for us sometimes to interpret something. Think of icons like Amazon and Microsoft, Apple. These are all icons that just take a fraction of a second for us to recognize when we see them, but to read a name may take longer. So it's a nice way to engage. But what we haven't done is we haven't turned this into a hyperlink, right? We talked about being able to increase that functionality. So here we're able to pull back the image. We're using the title and the alt to be able to provide some tooltips when we hover over it. That's all great, but we can definitely step it up another notch. And so I'm going to take that updated here. We see that all we've really done is gone up by a few lines. We were at, I think, 31, and now we got 38. And all we really added was taking this extra piece here where we're identifying we want to create an anchor tag, and we're going to wrap it around this repeatable URL pattern that we talked about. So twitter.com/current field, which is the value of our column, and then we're going to open that up in a new tab. And so if I hit preview, then I hover over that, you can see now we already see a little representation that it's different because we see that little pointer hand as opposed to the cursor, the pointer that was there. And when I click on that, then it automatically opens up in a new tab and takes us directly to that Twitter account. Now, again, none of this is absolutely changing any of the content that lives in that column. So if I were to edit this in grid view, what do we see? Well, we now still see that image, and we may think, well, you said that it wasn't editing that. Why am I seeing an image in grid view? Well, this is actually an enhancement by Microsoft that's pretty slick. When you're in edit mode, you still see your actual definition, representation, and result, which is really cool. But when you double click, see what happens. It just gives us access to that original value, and we can change that, and everything works. So pretty slick. Again, just shows more advancement by Microsoft in terms of investment in making the experience better and more consistent throughout, whether you're editing or displaying or whatever the case may be. So super powerful. There's a lot more column formatting available, a lot of samples available, a lot that can be done. We're going to move into view formatting now, but don't hesitate to look at all the samples that are available. I'll give you those links at the end. But let's take a moment and now move over to view formatting. Now, as we mentioned, view formatting gives us that same construct as column formatting. It's got the low-code JSON. It does now have a limited wizard experience, and the reason I wrote here continued improvement is because when it debuted, it wasn't. There was no wizard-like experience that you got with column formatting. And you could probably understand why, because it's hard to wizardify multiple columns without really knowing what those columns are. And so Microsoft can't make a ton of assumptions, but what they have done is they made some assumptions that you might want some effect to the entire row, and they've built that into a wizard and giving you some opportunity to kind of like wizardify that. Now, similar to column formatting, this is where you will override the entire item and row content. So you can still review and control that HTML. You can change the look and feel via those inline CSS styles and even more, and we'll show you that in the end. Now, there's no JavaScript here, though. So even though you're controlling the entire row, and you can create an experience that would probably challenge anyone's ability to identify it as a simple list item, there is still no JavaScript formal way to override that. And any attempt to do it is a little risky because that data does always get changed. Although there is a way to provide additional enhancements, and we'll talk about that and show you in the end, where you can add on some additional really cool features like animations and stuff like that. So we'll talk about that. Now let's dive directly into a view formatting demo. There's a lot of information to cover here. We're going to stick with this social profiles theme for the first couple of demos in view formatting. And if you were wondering, can the two be combined together, column formatting and view formatting? Yes. They won't cancel each other out. What I mean by that is if you apply a view formatting definition, and in fact, I'll just show you. I'm going to format this column. I'm going to grab the value for that, the content. I'm going to save. I'm going to move over to this tab where we see the same data a little bit more, right? We see country, state, and province, which we'll talk about in a moment, is there. We're able to add that here to Twitter still if we wanted. So I'm going to go into column formattings, format this, paste that in there, preview, and we see it's loading in Hugo and Emily. So that's there. So if I were to now add view formatting, which we will show you how to do, the view formatting overrides the entire view. So it's going to supersede what has been assigned to the column formatting definition, but it's not going to erase it. So if you were ever to revert back to a view that does not use view formatting, or you just eliminate your view formatting definition, the column formatting will come right back into play. Right? So they can build on top of one another. The view formatting will supersede it from a visual perspective, but it will not remove the definition that you've applied to that column, and we'll see how that looks like. Now, where in which you can only assign one column formatting experience to the column kind of makes sense. You have a column, there's one column formatting experience to apply to that. It is what it is. A view, though, there are multiple views that you can have on a list, right? You can create as many as you want. The cool thing is that each view can have its own view formatting definition. So think about that for a moment, because you could create multiple views for the same collection of data that maybe represent different things, or transform the data in your list to display or represent different things for different users or audiences within your organization. Same with personal views or public views, it can be the same thing. You can have a formatting assigned to each view. That allows you to create kind of pseudo dashboards for different purposes of the same list. And you don't have to display all of the same data in your view. So your view formatting definition can display different things across, and we'll kind of see what that looks like as well. But to engage in the view formatting definition for a view is done up here in that view dropdown, right? That typical area where we would go and we would select a different view per list that we want to look at. We're just going to stick with the all items view here, and I'm going to select format current view. And that is going to pop out from the right, the same experience that we saw here in the column. And in fact, they've added the ability just to kind of swap between the two if you wanted, which is kind of nice. So you can just swap between column formatting and view formatting. And so in this case, we're saying list and gallery are two of the options now. This is where we've got those options to create some degree of wizardification. Just think I made that word up. Wizardification, we can actually select that. And basic information, we can see that we've got the ability to style those rows. So I can change the colors if I want. We could do a nice little, I guess that's Viking-ish, looks more orangish than yellowish, but we've got the ability to do that. Some simple information that we can add. We can bold the information in it if we wanted to. Again, basic information. It's hard to just wizardify the data across an entire row. So they're doing their best, which I think will continue to get improved upon. And again, because this never really existed to begin with, it really is an improvement. So they're looking for areas in which we can do that. But as we come into this particular experience here, it's kind of, well, it's kind of interesting because we've got data here that might be confusing, right? So when we think about the data that's here, we know, and of course in Minnesota, if you're in that geographic region, you're close enough to Canada where you likely know what a province is. Not everybody is going to know what a province is. Maybe in the southern states of California or southern states of the U.S., excuse me, that aren't familiar with Canada. Provinces is essentially their version of states. And so it's not applicable for those from the U.S., right? Doesn't make any sense, which is why it's blank. And of course, for those in Canada, there's no point in having a state, right? And so it could be confusing to just display this as is. So maybe there's a more ideal way to represent this data in a more visually appealing and non-distracting or confusing way. And that's where view formatting comes in. So we're going to take some view formatting definitions. And again, we're just working with some very basic definitions. They do get a little longer as you start working with view formatting and more complex. So you can see now we're down to 119. But again, it's really just a recipe, if you will, that we're just using to identify what our information should look like. So I'm going to take those and we're going to build upon it here. One of the questions in the chat is there any new permission-based view formatting, hide and show some columns, or is permission based on capability itself? When you say capability itself, I think you just mean the inherent list. If the list has restrictions set up on it, or there's security trimming or something like that, yeah, there's not really any security assigned specifically to the list formatting. It's just if they can see it, they can build it. So you've got that field of dreams opportunity there. So I'm going to replace what Microsoft built for me here in those repeating rows, and we're going to hit preview. Now, what I've done is a complete departure from what we've seen to begin with, something similar to what you saw there in the beginning slides. We've taken a number of things. We've taken that profile photo from Twitter or some other outside source. We've wrapped everything into a little box and added some shadowing there, which is nice. And then we created a box and said follow kind of a call to action, right? So this is still a hyperlink. If I click on that, then it opens up in a new tab. Same for all of them. April's the same way. So I open up and we should be following all these people. Great contents. And so now we're able to display that information. Now you'll notice though, it doesn't include any of their location information. It doesn't include whether they're from the States or Canada or even what area of the States or Canada they're from. We could absolutely have just written that out here, right? So we could have done some conditional logic that just, did something like United States and whatever state Chris is from, and Bo and in Colorado, etc. But this is where it's a good example to show that we can actually do a little bit more. There are ways in which we can connect to outside services that, again, is not really necessarily a programmatic API, but where we can make a request to a service such as Google Maps or Bing Maps or something like that, where we provide a URL argument or parameter, and it just returns an image. So that's what we're going to do in this case. Is I'm going to paste down, and we're making a call out to Google. My tooltip is hiding there a bit, but it's fine. And we're identifying things like their province, and you can kind of see that state, etc. And so if that is if that's there, right, then we can, and we're doing that comparative logic. So I'm going to hit preview here. And now what we've done is we've created a much more dynamic way of understanding where they're from. So we see Chris here is from Tennessee, and we've actually made some faux functionality here too, because you see that little hand. Well, that now means that we can actually click on it. So it's not going to show down to the address. We're just identifying their country and state, but it goes into a nice little representation of the area that Chris is from. Same with April in Oklahoma and the rest of everyone around the country. Now, Seb is from Canada, which Quebec has quite a large footprint, so it shows a whole huge area here. But it just goes to show you that you can actually go in and get that information available to you. Now, let's save this. Pretty powerful, because we've really just taken nothing but that information. And let's talk a little bit about the creation of new data, because I promised that formatting opportunity. One of the confusing things here, if you're not familiar with the geography of the world, and this is only 2 states or 2 countries with the differences in their state and provinces, is you might not know that when you select one or the other, you need to select state only if you select US, and you select and you would select a province only if you select Canada. Right, so there are ways in which you can do some formatting manipulation. Now, you could certainly do this with a Power App, right? So we talked about this. April is definitely the queen of Power Apps and the Power Platform, knows a ton. She even admits that this might be a little overkill opportunity if there's just simple things that we need to be able to do. But now we're able to edit the columns here on this information for this form, and we're able to take advantage of that. Right, so based on, ideally, what we would want is, based on the country that's chosen, we would want to hide or show province, and you can do that. So you can do that with basic conditional formulas. As you can see, when I click the little ellipses button right there, we get the option to do what's called a conditional formula. And when I click on that, it just brings up some basic options. It doesn't fly out like we saw with the list formatting definitions, but some basic information here. And so I'm going to say if, and I think I've got this in order, if country is United States, then we want to display state, otherwise we want to hide it. So I'm going to hit save. You'll notice it kind of goes gray, and we're going to do the same for province. And I'm going to copy this here. I'm going to say if it's Canada, true, false. All right. And so now you'll notice right away, click save, you'll notice right away that those two items have gone away. So no longer they're there sitting there going, well, do I choose both? Do I need to choose both? So if I select Canada, now province shows up, gives me the option to choose it. If I select United States, now state shows up, gives me the option to choose the proper state. So this is a newer addition by Microsoft, which is pretty cool. It's simplistic, but powerful if you use it correctly. And in this particular case, where you're talking about a global organization and friends from all over the world, the list could go on, right? The number of countries supersedes just the two examples we're using here, and each country may have its own separation of geographic regions. And so now, instead of having, a laundry list of geographic regions, you could set it up to just be applicable to the particular country that's chosen. So pretty powerful and valuable to be able to use there for simple examples. Now let's jump to our last view formatting example. This one kind of combines everything, right? It's going to show a little combination of everything from conditional logic to comparative logic to mathematical logic. And what we've got is, myself and April, we're getting graded on a quarterly basis. Now this is go back to school. Remember, we would usually get a numeric grade at the end of each quarter, and that grade would be conditionally applied to a letter grade. And sometimes that changed from teacher to teacher. Some people would say, hey, you got to have a 99 to get an A+, or 100 to get an A+. Some would say 98 was good enough, or, you can see the conditional scale there is subjective by teacher. Now, these numbers could represent anything. They could be financial, they could be scores, they could be something else. They don't have to be quarters, they could be monthly, they could be weekly, they could be daily, they could be hourly, whatever you want. Here in this case, we're just representing them as grades across 4 quarters. But what we'd like to see is a little better representation of what this means. We'd even like to see an average grade throughout, what the average grade is for each quarter as we go through it. And then we would also like to see what that conditional letter grade would be. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to format current view, and I'm going to replace that. And you can see in this case, and again, we're not masquerading anything. When I use this one, we can see we're looking down at about 500 lines of JSON. Now, again, don't let this scare you. It certainly is meant to actually show you it's simplistic, because there's a lot of closing brackets here that kind of fluff this up a bit. But a lot of what's being done here is repetitive, right? So for the 4th quarter here, we're just doing a bunch of Excel-like expressions, which look kind of, that's kind of a lot to maybe take in at once. You see a lot of closing braces there, but they're easy to build upon. And really, you just kind of start with your basic expression and build upon it. And the reason this is so complex is because I added a whole bunch of conditional. If it's a 90, it's an A. If it's this or that, it's a B. If it's a C, et cetera, et cetera. And so they may not all be that complex. And so we're going to take this, and I'm going to just select all and apply it here. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to close that. Now we see what we've done is we've applied a much more legible way of understanding this data. So we've got our numeric grades for each quarter, right? What those are here, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. And then we're able to do that mathematical logic that compares the two or averages the 2 or 3 or 4. And then we're able to display what the letter grade is. So we both started strong. I slacked off. April kept it consistent. And by the end, she was a straight A student, and I finally knocked out a B+. But we're able to take all that information together and combine it. And again, in this case, literally all of this is being done by nothing more than 4 numbers. That's it, just four numbers. And we're able to do that average. We're able to do that conditional logic to display a letter grade and all that information. So super, super powerful. Let's talk about taking it a little bit further. You may want some list formatting resources. So we're gonna give you a few of those, and then I want to show you some really cool things that you can really use to transform your list even more to a degree of extensibility. So the first thing is, I talked a lot about the different list formatting samples that are available to you. There is a patterns and practices repo where you can go to aka.ms/list.formatting. I'll put that in the chat, but that takes you to over 50 plus view formatting, 70 plus column formatting. And keep in mind that column formatting samples can be applied to view formatting. We saw that with the Twitter picture, right? Where we did something in a column formatting definition and then applied it to the view formatting. And so they're multifunctional in that way. So you can get to those 2 GitHub samples there, or just go to the list formatting definition there, or sample URL there. Every other week, there is a patterns and practices call where quite often Chris Kint, who is in charge of that repo, does demos on list formatting and is always showing off the latest and greatest. Really worth making the time to attend live and see it. Although if you can't, we understand. Your time would be 9 a.m. Central Time if you're in the Minnesota area. And so you could see that. You could get to that by going to aka.ms/M365PNP and look for the different community call options. And you're looking for the general development community call, and you could add that to your calendar if you want. If you can't make it, they're all recorded. You can watch it later. We separate out each demo available for you, and so you can take advantage of that. Now, there's also some free tools that are available to you here to enhance it. There is an SP formatter, which is created by someone in the community, which is super awesome. It allows you to do some almost inline code editing if you wanted to, that doesn't require you to just do it in the box like we saw there. There's some tools. HTML to formatter, right, where you can do HTML will generate the schema for you. And then Flycon. If you like using iconography, I love using iconography because I talked about us being visual creatures. Flycon is a way in which you can go get icons that's created by Chris, and you can get some access to those additional icons that aren't necessarily available just directly through Microsoft. Now let's take a minute. We still have a little time left, and so I wanted to show you some advanced and really transformation opportunities that you can do. So far, everything that we've looked at on the page has been directly living within the list itself, right? What's really, really cool is that Microsoft has the list web part. Now this list web part, as we can see here, is an example of that. I've created a page. I'm on an actual page. I'm no longer in the list, and I've added 2 of my list web parts. Now the great thing is that if I refresh here, you're going to see now it's inherited that list formatting. Now we could set up different views. Maybe I wanted a view that is Canada, and maybe I wanted a view that is United States, right? So the reason one here has the toolbar and one doesn't is quite simply because you can toggle that. I left that on one and not on the other to be able to show you. So that's on here. I can edit this web part, and I can show the command bar by turning that back on, and now they both have that available to them. You can turn it off on both of them, but the point here is that you're able to generate pseudo dashboards, right? And if we were to hide this toolbar, with the exception of the see all, that's one thing that you kind of just have to kind of live with. I'm going to hit hide, and it's kind of weird how you're turning it on to hide. It sounds like a double negative. And I'm going to hit republish. And now, you'd be hard pressed, with the exception of the see all, which kind of is the breadcrumb to the wizard behind the curtain. You'd be hard pressed to know that these were created just simply by list formatting definitions, which is really, really slick. So super powerful, super useful ways to not just have to live within the list, or if you want to provide that enhanced experience to your users, you'd be, someone said would be able to love, would love to be able to hide see all. I would too. I absolutely would too, because then it would really create just a seamless experience. But by and large, you still have a pretty good experience here. If someone is viewing this, then chances are, they're going to be able to get to the list anyways, if they're pulling in this data from the list web part. So there's not really anything you're super hiding. It just, I think it provides a little more polish if you're able to hide that. Now, super awesome, really fantastic. Everything we've seen so far is 100% out of the box. Let's talk about how you can step it up with a little bit of extensibility. Now, you may or may not know there are rules of the game of extending the SharePoint experience in the modern world. In Classic, you could own, by changing the master page, pixel 00 in the upper left corner of your screen to pixel whatever is in the lower right of your screen. And you could change anything and everything if you change the master page and you controlled it. No longer have that opportunity within the modern world. Now, doesn't mean that we don't have control. Doesn't mean that we're all just, the same looking robot-like experiences within our SharePoint world. It just means that there are less areas in which we can be extending the experience. And that's a good thing, because Microsoft is actually continually improving all these features. We talked about how they've continued to improve list formatting here, and we've seen that. If we try to override areas of the page that we don't own, then that's going to break, because Microsoft is continually improving, which means they're constantly changing the content and the structure of the page to ensure that it's responsive design friendly, to ensure that it's usable and useful and performant and getting better and better and better. Now, we may sit here and look at this and say, okay, well, so this is the degree of extensibility we can create. Let's take a look at another list formatting definition that's been created. And I just wanted to show this one because it really steps it up a notch significantly for us. What we've done here is I'm on a page, right? So I'm in just a different SharePoint site. I'm on a page, and I've created a list formatting definition, and that's all this really is. And if I click see all, I'll show you that. There's no smoke and mirrors. It takes me directly to my list. We now see we're at a list here called community contributors, and we're able to interact with this, right? So this really is nothing more than that information. I've got some information about them. It's still a list. There's no smoke and mirrors here, but we've created this nice, cool looking Polaroid list formatting definition, a nicer way to display that information. And what I've done is I've associated with that list formatting definition. I'll just format the current view here, and I'll find a place down here. I've created some class names. Now, this is used for cascading style sheets, or CSS. And this is an area where, guess what? We do own. So when we create our list formatting definition, we're able to identify custom class names for the HTML that's created. Well, who owns that? Well, Microsoft is outputting it, but we created it. So Microsoft is not going to override our class names that we've created. But what that does mean is that we're able to use those for even more extensibility and improving the user experience when we use it in conjunction with the list page. Or the list on a page, list web part on a page. So you might say, well, how do you do that, right? Because most of the time we think, okay, the list web part is out of the box, so we're not going to extend that. And if we do, we're taking a risk that Microsoft is going to change it and it's going to break our extensibility experience that we've added. But in this case, it's inheriting the experience that we've identified and defined in our list formatting definition. So it's kind of like a marriage, if you will, right? They're providing the web part, we're providing the content by way of the list formatting definition. And they're not going to change when we've identified a specific class name. That's going to be available to us. So the question then is, how do we take advantage of that? Well, again, by way of the Patterns and Practices community, there is a web part that you can download and take advantage of. It's called Enhanced List Formatting. Now, this is created by the Patterns and Practices community, and this is a very, very powerful web part for purposes of combination with list formatting. But it could also be used for evil, right? So we want to apply the Spider-Man principle here as quoted by Uncle Ben. Great power comes great responsibility, right? We are able to use this to inject custom class and styles directly onto the page. Now, we could always do this with something more robust, like an SPFX or SharePoint Framework extension, where it's applying everywhere. In this case, it's a little more performant. We're able to apply it directly to the page, and only the page where we want to apply these styles. And what happens is it first gives us this warning. We thought it was important to recognize that, again, this is a hero's web part, meaning that you can be a superhero with this web part. You don't want to be a villain. If you use this web part to try to override other things on the page, like the suite bar or the header, or someplace that Microsoft owns the HTML for, well, you're taking a risk that it's going to result in loss of styles being applied, broken styles. Why is my SharePoint broken? Tears, nightmares, blue screens of death, none of which we want. So we want to make sure we use it in a heroic way. You don't want to try to override things that aren't yours, right? So we just kind of provide that as some warning. Now, what you're able to do is you're able to add some custom styles, right? And that just brings out a little sidebar here where you can define your custom CSS. We could click the little increase button there, which will create a more robust palette for us to be able to make modifications for. And all we're really going to do is add in some CSS. Now, remember, we're not talking JavaScript. We're just simply talking CSS. This is mainly for experience change. So it allows us to have access to things that aren't available directly in line in our list formatting definition. So think of what's called pseudo attributes. So things like, hey, I want something to happen when the cursor hovers over a particular element. And that can be done with CSS. You don't require any JavaScript. You don't have to have a hover method or function or anything like that. You can do this with just CSS. So I'm going to hit save on this. You'll notice the first thing that's happened without even hovering or changing anything is it just skewed the images a little bit more, right? So that it feels a little more natural, like they were placed on a table, because when we put pictures down on a table, likely we're not going to perfectly align them. We're just going to lay them down, and there might be a little bit of a shift or a skew on them. Pretty cool. Now, when we hover over them, what happens? What's that hover? Well, it just changes the perspective. It does square it up, and it zooms it in a little bit more. And so now we're able to bring a little bit more attention. And again, it's not unrequested attention. It's only when the user hovers over that. It's an important thing to remember about animation. You don't want to do it when they're not asking for it. So in this case, I'm hovering over that, and it's bringing to the forefront a little bit more who it is that I'm choosing to focus on. So pretty powerful. But wait, there's more. We can take that even further. We're going to come up here and change those custom styles. And I'm just going to replace that. Again, we're going to be using some hover effects here. And I'm going to click out of there. And now what have we done? Well, let's take a look. Everything has changed to black and white. We'll come back to that in a moment. Remember when you did do Polaroids and they're kind of coming back in? I know my daughter has requested to get a Polaroid camera because her phone's not good enough, I guess. But we used to write on them, right? We used to write on the Polaroid kind of the name or the location or the year or both. And so now what we've done is we've actually connected out to a custom font to be very surgical and precise in where we're applying that custom font. You wouldn't want to try and apply it everywhere. You only want to try to apply it in areas you own, but this is one of those acceptable moments where we own the styles for this particular component because we added the custom class name. So here we're able to scope the usage of our font directly to just that piece on this page. And it's now looking like they were written a little bit more by hand. So it looks a little bit more authentic, which is nice. Now, again, back to the black and white. If I come back out here and hover over it, well, now we're able to use that CSS to transition from black and white to color. So now it pops even more when I'm making that hover choice of who I want to focus in on and learn more about. And so it's pretty cool because it just, again, it provides a little extra layer of animation, user experience that's going to improve how users are going to enjoy the application. Now, there's one more really cool thing I want to show off here, and that's the ability to use sprites and animation within CSS. I'm going to come back and edit this again. Select all and paste. And now you'll notice what's happened is it's added a little heart to each individual corner of the Polaroid. Now, when I hover over it, we still get the same experience, right? But when I hover over that heart, see what happens? It gives a little bit of an explosion of the heart. And so we could certainly connect this out. This could be a hyperlink that connects out to some API or some programmatic connection, a flow maybe, that then goes in. And when I click this, it sets the user to like maybe a user column to favorite or something like that, right? Follow or something like that. And then we could, of course, use that in our list formatting definition to now maybe display it as a constant red instead of a grayed heart, right? So we could use that conditional logic we talked about where if that column says follow or favorited or something like that, and then when we preload this, then we're able to see the heart red representing something of a choice that we made. So super, super powerful. Again, all of this is being done with nothing more than CSS, right? We've got, of course, this component here, the enhanced list formatting web part that is available for free, and you can install within your particular site or tenancy, and it provides you this ability to step it up a notch. Now, remember, this is, though, not out of the box. There is another layer here that you're adding to your tenancy, but the value add that you get is hopefully very apparent by way of these demos. Really able to step it up a notch with animations and stuff like that. All right, we just have a couple minutes left, so I wanted to provide the opportunity to thank you all for attending. Hopefully you've seen something here today that's either been new or exciting for you. There is a lot of resources available to you, and we will continue to look for opportunities to include that in this session. One of the last questions in the chat is, do you expect similar functionality to be added to the out-of-the-box options? I hope. I love that they're continuing to push the envelope there. The beauty here is that whether it's there or not, the community has stepped in to provide an option. And really there's sometimes more opportunity to see that advancement by way of the community. But Microsoft is really good about seeing extensibility created by the community, seeing the rallying support around it, and then bringing that in-house and providing it as an out-of-the-box option. So definitely let them know that you're liking the things you're seeing. For example, this patterns and practices initiative and the web part, et cetera, et cetera. Let them know that because that helps them understand what it is that people are looking for and want. So tons of opportunity. Again, thank you for having me and by way of me, the hard work of April as well. Don't hesitate to reach out to us or connect or follow us on Twitter. We'd love to collaborate even more. But other than that, thank you for your time. Michelle, back to you.
Awesome, David. And I hold on just 1 second. We've got at least another 10 minutes if you want. I just would love, because I don't think that we talk about PNP and we talk about GitHub and there's a little disconnect. Like, is that supported? Should we be doing that? Is that is it out of the box? Is it something that Microsoft supports? And I'm just curious because I don't think a lot of people understand, like, what is patterns and practices? Where did it come from? I threw a link in there, but do you have a little time to kind of walk through what it is? What is the community trying to do, and what are some of the things that it's already built up to solve for some of those things that are not out of the box?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a initiative started by Microsoft, but ran by Microsoft and MVPs. So it's not like it's just Microsoft employees in some of that stereotypical old school perspective of, oh, they don't understand us. It is absolutely a collaboration of Microsoft employees and the community. So if we go down here, you can go to aka.ms M365 PNP, which Michelle put in the chat. This is really your one-stop shop landing page for you to learn about all the initiatives that are available. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom here just to show you the team members that make it up. And you can see it is a wide spectrum of geographic regions and practices and Microsoft employees and MVPs all across the world. Really proud to be part of this team. and we are all here to support the community. Now, in terms of what are some of the things that are available to you by way of this team, well, the first and foremost we talked about is the community calls, right? So every week on Thursdays, there is a community call that is dedicated to SharePoint framework or the general development, right? So that's the one that gets the list formatting. You can come get that. Now, I say every week because these are bi-weekly. They flip-flop every other week. So one week you got SharePoint framework, the next week development. And then starting at the end of this month, we're going to have a weekly, right here, a weekly call on Tuesdays. Now this one is special because these two, they are driven by demos of the community, right? You are more than welcome to come demo. In fact, we would love you to, and we'd have a mechanism that'll help assist you if you want to. We even had a 14-year-old demo, so there's just no limitations there. This Tuesday call is going to be primarily bringing in the engineering teams across Microsoft to do demos and stuff like that. So that's may seem like meeting overkill, but it's actually consolidating a lot of different meetings and community calls. So you're going to weekly on Tuesdays, and then every week on Thursdays will be a different topic. But definitely identify with those three. They're going to be fantastic, and we've got other ones as well that are available to you. So those are the community calls. Now we've also got tech community where a lot of blogging is being done, and you could actually blog there as well. So reach out if you'd like to learn more about that. If you'd like to contribute, one of the initiatives that I run is called Sharing is Caring. Now, this is one that's near and dear to my heart because what it is it provides you hands-on guidance on how to accomplish some of the things that have proverbially been blockers for people to get more involved in the past. Like, hey, I don't understand GitHub, and I don't blame you. It's got confusing names like fork and blame and raw, right? And all kinds of weird verbs and phrases and stuff like that don't make any sense in terms of community. But when you get to know it, you can actually do a whole lot with it. You can create your own documentation that'll live at docs.microsoft.com. You can edit existing documentation. You can submit samples, upgrade samples, and we want to walk you through all that. So these sessions are all free to attend, live, hands-on, where we walk you through together how to accomplish a certain thing. Maybe you're wanting to get involved with SPFX samples and just getting started. Maybe you do more productivity than coding. Well, guess what? There's a whole bunch of stuff you could utilize VS Code for, which may sound like it's just a development tool, but it's not. There's a whole lot of functionality there for those that are writing Markdown for documentation. Maybe you want to present for the first time, and you're not quite sure some of the tips and tricks to go into presenting. We've got a session on that. We've got more we're creating. We have AMAs. We've got a Power Platform, and they are thematic and they change from month to month. So we have different people from Microsoft coming in and PNP to be there for you just to ask questions. So this is going to have Hugo Bernier and April Dunham. We've had Victor Willen and Bob German. We're going to have Paul Bolick for script samples coming up in September. So a lot of opportunity. This one, again, is really near and dear to my heart because we walk you through. And by the way, totally inclusive. We don't even record them. So there's no fear of needing to ask a question that's going to go on record where you may be, a lot of people are afraid to ask questions because they think, well, maybe I should know this. Well, ask your questions. We want to answer them. If you ask it, likely everyone's going to have had the question at some point. But we know when that record goes on, some are a little scared to ask those questions. So these are all very inclusive and available to you. And if you have questions along the way, we've created an office hours for you to just connect one-on-one. I mentioned if you'd like to buddy up with someone to do a presentation, we have the buddy system. Allie Collins was our 14-year-old presenter a couple months ago. That was a buddy system where her and I and her mom got together and practiced and put the presentation together and stuff like that. And we were able to get her on the stage, and then she got invited to build. It was a really cool moment. Because it just shows how inclusive the community is. But if you'd like to do that, because it takes the weight off, and we kind of have a presentation on rails. And so we'd love to see you get more involved and present. And this is an easy way to do that because we're going to do it with you right along the way and make sure you're well taken care of. Now, in terms of and we'll come back to the recognition program in a moment because that's a really exciting one too. There's a whole bunch of guidance. We've got Microsoft Teams, a graph, SharePoint framework. We've got samples available to you. We've got samples and solutions, Power Platform samples, SharePoint framework, web parts and extensions, script samples, Teams apps, Office add-ins, column view formatting. So this is the one we're probably most interested in based on this call. All kinds of samples are available to you. Of course, everyone knows the SDKs if you're doing any development work, PNP.js or PowerShell, things like the CLI or Yeoman generator for Teams. Again, all of these things are ran by the patterns and practices teams, and we have forums, et cetera, for you to be able to interact with. Now, all of this is based on consumption of the tools and resources, and the only way those tools and resources are actually improved upon is by everybody in the community. So it's a worldwide initiative. It is open source. Everyone is able to contribute, and Sharing is Caring is there to help you if you're not quite sure where to get started. But once you do contribute, we love nothing more than to celebrate it and really celebrate you and the work you do. So the recognition program just launched recently. This is an exciting program that we are promoting and providing essentially formal and real recognition by way of Credly. Now, you may not be familiar with Credly. Credly is the platform that does and handles all of the Microsoft certification badges. And so we have partnered with Credly, Patterns and Practices partnered with Credly to be able to take the celebration and the recognition of all the hard work of you all in the community and step it up a notch. So you can earn badges based on different contribution types. We're just starting out slow with our initial contributor badge for 2021, but we're going to have additional badges that are going to be available to you for different campaigns. Some are going to be fun limited edition badges. If you're familiar with Parker, which is our little mascot here, there's going to be different Buddy the Elf themed ones and hockey themed ones for maybe a hat trick challenge or a Hacktoberfest. Where you contribute during October, and we know Hacktoberfest is considered that time of the year. But it's super cool to be able to show off the work that you're being done, and it's green and it's digital, and it really sits alongside the work that you're being done. So you can see the different badges here that are available, right? Our community contributor, and let me see if I can get. See, yep, there's April's. She has got a plethora of certification badges. Here they all are. And you can see that the Patterns and Practices badges sit right alongside. And so it really provides credibility to the work that you're doing. And we've also set up a LinkedIn page for you to be able to connect. Wow. And then there's April. Man, that's like,
you said my name and I appear.
I told you she's like a goddess. This is a really fantastic way to be able to recognize. April, we're talking about the recognition program and showing how we're starting to recognize. Michelle asked us to kind of overview patterns and practices. Everyone's got to be tired of hearing me talk. Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, well, just first of all, kudos to David for really having the vision for this badge program. It's really cool way to get recognized for just being involved in the PNP community. You know, whether you're contributing a sample, whether you're helping maintain a repo, whatever it might be. Just our goal is to recognize everyone for their hard work and their contributions to the community through PNP. So it's a really great recognition program to get involved with.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And it is completely free. We do need everyone to register for this so we can connect your GitHub to your email you're going to use for Credly so that when we issue the badges, we know where we're sending them to based on the work you've done. So I put the link in the chat. Feel free to please register, even if you're just thinking of contributing in the future and you want to be ready, register. We keep record of everybody. And it's really going to be a lot of fun. Before you join, I know you're going to love this one, April. I was telling them about the Buddy the Elf version of Parker and stuff like that we're gonna be doing in Hacktoberfest and stuff. So
yeah, looking forward
Michelle,
to that.
it's gonna be fun. Michelle, does that cover? I don't want to eat up too much more time. I know you said we have 10 minutes, but
No, that was fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on, April. Hey, and David, what a plethora of information. I think everybody can agree. This has been fantastic. Just a snapshot into what you can do in PNP and then what the program really is and how, if you're just first time, I think of things that excite me like adaptive cards. that's going to be just a huge wave, I think, in the next couple of years inside of teams and creating adaptive cards, connecting them out. Go ahead and jump in and learn about how you can start doing that, because that's the next wave of development, along with so many other things like understanding the graph API and the extensibility. So fantastic overview, you guys.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And again, they're all free. There's no cost here to use these resources. So take advantage of them. We'd love to collaborate with everybody.
All right. Well, thank you. And we'll see you guys on the other side. If anyone needs to get in touch, follow both David and April on Twitter, of course. They are always posting just incredible information on what they're doing and all the latest features that are out there. So with that, Adam, I guess I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Michelle. So yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Let me go ahead and share out my screen and we'll get started. All right. So let me share. There we go. Can everyone see my screen okay?
I think it's just coming on. Yep, looks good.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. So hi, everyone. Very happy to be joining this group today to chat about a little about Teams devices and really kind of that hybrid workplace, that hybrid workforce. You know, I feel like this is a conversation we've had for the last year and a half, right? Which is, hey, how are we doing the return to work scenario? And it seems like every time that we're ready to have that conversation, something else happens. And then that conversation gets pushed or changed again. So here we are for the third or fourth time, probably here to talk about, you know, what does it mean to return to the office, or at least in some parts of the world. So before we get started, I'd love to share a little bit about myself. So for me, I'm down in Cincinnati, Ohio. A couple of things about myself. I joined Microsoft back about 10 months ago, but been in the Microsoft UC space for the last, I don't know, 15, 16 years. So it was really funny listening into David and then April there at the end talking about all the SharePoint lists. I can remember back like SharePoint 2003 was probably the last SharePoint implementation I touched. So it looks like things changed quite a bit in the last 18 years or so. So for my side, I'm really kind of in that telco and voice space. That's where I've lived for the last 18 years. And then obviously, just to share a little bit myself, 3 disparate hobbies that have nothing to do with each other that I share with my wife and my 2 girls here in Cincinnati. So, are you ready for the hybrid workplace? I will tell you that for a lot of the conversations that I have in my day-to-day, the answer comes down to, we think so. So that's kind of what we're hearing today. And what I'd like to do is kind of share a little bit of some of the information that we've heard about here at Microsoft around what others are thinking about. So we put out this survey out to about 30,000 different people in 31 different countries, asking about what they're excited about or what's happening in the world about that return to work. There's a couple of these things on this list that I find really interesting, and I'd love to share them with you. First is, just like Thanos, hybrid work is inevitable. We're going to live in a world today where at some point there will be people at home and there'll be people in the office, and that'll be okay. We also start seeing a situation where individuals at certain employers are looking to move on because maybe their organization is looking about being back all in person. So there's a lot of hesitancy and a lot of concern that we're finding across organizations themselves. And so as we start thinking about what does it mean for teams, or what does it mean for meeting rooms, or what does it mean for, just hybrid work in general, how are we going to handle some of these really difficult questions and these new scenarios that exist on how to take them moving forward? I love to share examples about things that I heard, and I had this customer about a month ago ask me, saying that their CIO had decided that Monday through Wednesday they were going to be at home, and Thursday and Friday they were going to be in the office. And so that they had instructed their executive assistant to say that if you're going to have a meeting at a certain level, to have that meeting on either a Thursday or a Friday. So can you imagine the kind of Outlook calendar that you're going to have to start keeping if there's going to be certain portions of the population that say, hey, you can only have a meeting with me when I'm in the office. I don't want to have a meeting at home. So it's really interesting how we're starting to see kind of these newer scenarios exist. And one thing that's really going to be help driving those scenarios is really that last point around video conferencing devices. We're going to see, by 2025, a 6x investment in more video and video conferencing devices, whether it's per person or in that room as a whole. So one thing that we've been talking about are, what are those 4 key areas when it comes to Teams devices, and specifically probably more in the meeting rooms aspect, do we need to hit to make sure that we are covering all the aspects of having successful and engaged end users within our organizations today? So we kind of boiled it down to these 4: inclusivity, ease of use, flexibility, and then obviously the security and the management of those individual devices. We're going to walk through each one of these different 4 categories as we go. And I'll try to keep an eye on chat as well. So if you do have a question, feel free to jump in. So first we want to talk a little bit about inclusivity. One of the things that we started here is we have to make sure that we're doing a good enough job so that everybody is being included into that meeting. Not only just from an accessibility perspective, but also just from an end user and an engagement perspective. If you think back, it seems like a long time ago now, but if you can think back to 2019, remember if we used to sit in those conference rooms, either for a partner, visiting a customer, or we're part of an organization, and then some of those rooms you get into, you forget about the ominous voice in the ceiling that was still in the call and trying to participate. A lot of times either they were too loud or they were too muffled, or sometimes you were having conversations about lunch and forgot that there are these 14 people that are still trying to participate in this meeting. So we want to make sure that everybody has that high quality audio and video experience, whether in the room or remote. We also want to help to increase that engagement. I think Donald earlier talked a little bit about the live captions. We talked a little. You've seen here today with some of the emojis that we've used here in this chat. But be able to capture that engagement so that people are paying attention and are in general agreement with what you're saying. And the last one here, this is one I'm also pretty excited about, is around kind of the continued evolution of Microsoft Whiteboard. There's some really cool things that are coming there that I'll share here in just a moment. A couple of really awesome things here, and I'll try to keep this high level. If you do have those more technical questions, I love those as well, and love to have those pop up in the chat as we go. But the one that I really want to concentrate on here first is really this last bullet point, which is really some of the new advances that we've made in the audio and video codec world. One of which is something called Satin. So if you can think back to some of the different audio codecs that are available in Teams today. Skype, when we did the acquisition of Skype, we got something called Silk. Silk is a specific audio codec. It's very high compression, and it gives you pretty good audio fidelity. There's a new one that's been released and slowly rolled out over Microsoft Teams, known as Satin. Satin is a marketed improvement upon Silk, and it allows to have even the most narrow band of audio have really high fidelity. If you search for Satin on your favorite your search engine today, you'll find an entire article that's written by one of our developers that goes through the entire Satin experience and also has some audio samplings of what Satin sounds like as compared to other audio codecs that you may find at other places. So very awesome place to see that, and some of the additional improvements around that. We also talk more about some of the I think my thing just there we go. Some of the different inclusivity that we have when it comes to video. So you may have already seen this today in our desktop client, where we have things like together mode and large gallery. But we're bringing those types of same video layouts to our Teams devices as well. So you can see here that not only do we have a situation where we can have different layouts in terms of, watch together mode and whatnot. But if you have dual displays in a meeting room, you now can separate where you have maybe people on one screen, content on another. You may have your gallery or your view, your gallery actually spread across two screens if you don't have any content. So we have a lot more options that are available when it comes to how you want to lay out your video content within the room. Great question here from Alicia around does inclusivity include joining with other platforms? The answer is yes, and I have a slide on that. So thanks for teeing that up. I'll chat about that when I get there. One of the other really neat areas that we've been focusing on, you may have saw a video, and I'll drop the YouTube link in towards the end of my chat today, that Jared Spataro, who's one of our corporate vice presidents, over hybrid work, actually did a great talk around the future of Teams meetings and lays out kind of the vision of where we're going when it comes to our Teams meetings. One of those areas was around something that we're calling front row. What front row is, it really is set to really kind of foster a deeper, deeper sense of connection. So you can see here down below, if you think about a traditional meeting room where, you've got users and you've got the postage stamps of the people, what front row is going to be doing for us is actually giving us a real world height of the individual in the room where we can actually put that up on a wall and actually feel like that you're more or less meeting with folks in the room individually. So you can see here, instead of having the bar of our users on the top or on the right, we now have them below and actually have them in a much more prominent position. Again, this is allowing us to kind of almost meet eye to eye with the users in the room. So if you think about, sitting in a conference room, maybe you're staring at a video board or even a projector projecting on a wall, you would see our friends here at the bottom of the screen really at your own eye level so that you can start to connect with them and really kind of meet face to face with your remote colleagues. Also, you'll see some other things that have changed on this. I'll talk about. Not only do you see your chat on the right, but you're also going to start to get a deeper sense of additional apps that you can bring in to a Teams meeting. So I think David was talking about this earlier as part of the PNP program. There's going to be lots of ways to now develop, those apps for, in-house inside of a meeting themselves. So here you can see that we are following along with the agenda that we've planned here. And we can actually assign work action items right out of that agenda for folks in that meeting. So all kinds of new increased engagement that we can have right here within a singular room inside of a singular content panel. One other thing you're also thinking about is the understanding of increasing engagement. We talked about that, video is uncomfortable for a lot of individuals. I'm sure many of you today may have to take video calls during the day. I am on video at least 8 hours a day. And I will tell you, when it gets about 6 o'clock Eastern time, I'm ready to not stand in front of this computer and talk to this little small camera lens that I see here on my desk. And that is a skill or a muscle that you have to flex consistently. And it takes time. It's very uncomfortable. And sometimes it can actually be not as inclusive to have folks on video. So we want to give people a way to engage with the audience, engage with their colleagues. That doesn't require them being on video all the time. And that's why we started to add new features. One of those features is around raised hand. So that if you do have a question, instead of trying to, interrupt or butt in when someone is going through a giant monologue about a specific work action item, you now can have a very polite and pleasant way to try to, edge into the conversation. Or if you are using those emoticons, those emojis, the applause or heart or laughing, you now have the ways that you can show and build some engagement. And I will tell you, as someone that speaks to a lot of folks, those are encouraging to hear. Many times it feels like we're just talking into a black hole, but to have that level of engagement back from in this case, an audience type of perspective, it really does help. And not only can you see that across the desktop client, it's important to note we're bringing that to devices, as well as you see here on my screen, mobile devices as well. So you have that complete ability to, whether you're taking your dog for a walk and joining that call to get away from your office, or you're in a conference room, that you can still share that same type of engagement with your fellow coworkers. Content cameras is one of those things that's kind of been around for a while. I think it was announced, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 2019, maybe it was late 2018, where you're having the ability of now, interacting with a user that maybe is at a whiteboard and be able to actually see and follow along with what's being written in the room. And I think what you're going to start to see is, still kind of moving forward with that kind of co-creation experience when it comes to, a whiteboard that's on premises and using things around content cameras in rooms. We'll talk more about this here in a little bit, but having the ability to have a really flexible and modular room where you can bring in specific use cases for that room is really something that, the hybrid workplace is really going to need. You may have a situation that you're in a huddle room where you don't need such a type of accessory, where you're maybe in a large, war room type of scenario where you need multiple of these type of content cameras to grab all the whiteboards surrounding the room. So having the ability to have that, and then having the AI processing of what we're seeing on the screen and bringing that ink kind of to that clear and vibrancy status really is one of those, really just kind of sets it apart type of features. And I think you're going to see this feature continue to grow and really even bring more prevalence now that we start thinking kind of about that hybrid workplace where we want to have those remote users to really have, a first-class experience in the conference room. So although inclusivity is very important for us, one of the other key things that we want to make sure that we're also covering is we have to make this easy to use. Some of the things that we're trying to do is really maintain that consistent user experience. You're also going to see some of the new things that we're doing in terms around safety. So you can imagine here where we have this picture of this nice lady here pushing a screen to join a meeting. Are there ways that we can do that better? Although touch surfaces are still being cleaned appropriately, are there ways we can do it without having to do a lot of additional touching of items in a room? So those are things that we're also thinking about how we can continue to improve. One of those ways is really that consistent user experience. I'm sure there's probably many of you on the phone today that that have not necessarily maybe had a lot of Teams devices or running a device that's using that Teams client kind of out of the box. I know they were starting to get some level of prevalence before pre-pandemic, but our assumption is a lot of these organizations are now kind of looking for those devices and looking to bring them into their meetings today. So from that, we want to be able to replicate and emulate that experience as much as possible. Now, one key thing to note here is that the devices themselves are running a version of the Teams client, but it's not exactly the same desktop client that you're running at this moment. So it's a client built around the same code base that's really focused in that individual device experience. That's also managed and maintained by us at Microsoft and then deployed through the Teams Admin Center. So you're getting that same consistent experience no matter if you're in St. Paul at an office or you're in Chile working with a similar device. Having that same experience is very key, and one of the key things that we're finding to be very successful to really kind of reduce the learning curve and also reducing the little table tents with a little, click this button, dial 9 for an outside line, so that we've all seen as well. Also, the ability to join and participate in Teams meetings. I mean, for organizations that if you're making the move to Teams, and especially for Teams meetings and Teams phone, having, again, that same experience and having the ability to use that room to join meetings are all ways that are going to be much more prevalent to your end users out in the field. And we see this a lot with hybrid work. There was an organization there that contacted me. They deployed 55,000 users in the year 2020 on a Teams phone. Back in July, they decided to come back into the office, and they were presented with their old Cisco telepresence rooms. And everyone went, I don't know how to make this experience that I've been using for the last year like that experience anymore. How do I connect these two things? So having those ways now where you've built that muscle with your users and being able to harness that muscle with those types of experiences in the room, we think are going to be very awesome for and really kind of requirement for some of the users to get back to continuing to have that hybrid experience that they got used to during the stay at home. The last one here about safety. So there's a bunch of things that we're doing in this space. Some of the things that are already announced, some things that are on the public roadmap, and some things we just can't talk about just yet. But one thing about this that I think is really interesting is what are some of the capabilities that we can do to really try to protect the users in the room. So you can start thinking about using Cortana to not maybe start or end the meeting. You can cast your own content from your mobile phone, tablet, right to something like a Teams room device or a Surface Hub. So, we can also post room capacity to really kind of prevent crowded rooms. These are just some of the areas where we're starting to think about things that are really interesting for organizations to have to overcome. In fact, we've had a couple of organizations that reach out to us that said that they want to have notifications to go to their security operations center when we can, to do a people count of how many people are in the room and then start notifying if they're over the allotted amount of users in that room. Obviously, if you haven't seen before in a resource account, but you can set the room size. So if your room size is usually 8 people, but you're going to only allow 3 or 4 people in that room, that's something that you can set in the resource account for the Teams device. And that way, make sure that your count is happening the way you want it to. So safety is a big piece of this. We also want the ability for folks like Sin that are using their personal devices. If you walk into a room with a laptop, there's going to be some advancements that are going to be coming about how to just stay and use only that laptop device. So lots more announcements coming on the safety portion of this that we would expect maybe later this year. Definitely keep an eye on the Teams public roadmap, and you'll see some of the announcements that'll be coming soon. Or you can just wait and let Don tell you in the September meeting, because he seems to be on top of those as well. So let's talk about flexibility. I think this is a thing, as someone who comes from the telecommunications world, who used to build, those very large Polycom RMX rooms, those multi-million-dollar rooms that we all used to have. I think this is the thing that probably gets me the most excited for organizations today is you can now have a really first-class experience without having to spend 6 digits on a room to make it work. I mean, this is the thing that if you think about the thing in the last 5 years that's changed in the world of unified communications. This is it, in my opinion. If you can go back in Microsoft's time to the Link room system or the Skype room systems of the old. I mean, those were systems that cost in the 5-digit figures. They were heavy. You had to, get someone to come and hang and bang and put the device on the wall, and it had to, meet all these requirements. Also that there are still some of those requirements there, but now it's a lot more consumable for organizations to do so. Another example that I love to give here is on the flexibility is I help run a nonprofit cat shelter of all things here in Cincinnati, and I blame my wife for that. But I become the IT guy, and what they like to do is they actually like to have think of it almost like virtual rounding for their fosters, between the fosters at home and the conference room at the shelter. So the fosters join, they can do almost like a check of the foster kittens. I know this is super cute, but they do a little check of the foster kittens if there's a problem, if there's an ear infection or bowel movements, or even one veterinarian told me one time they told the foster to go get some of the feces of the kitten so that they can look at it. I mean, this is the kind of task that, I really jumped into here with 2Force. But, bringing in a very low cost device, I think it was like $600-700 device that I can put in a small conference room at this nonprofit shelter to allow them to jump in and have people join by Teams or WebEx or Zoom to get that experience was just really awesome. So now a veterinarian can just camp out there for the day and do their entire foster rounds right there in the shelter. Don't have to even get into a car, which is something brand new for the shelter, and they were very excited that we could bring that to them. Those are the types of flexibility and those types of stories that we hear a lot about. And I think the one thing here is that this really starts to enter the, that phrase that we've all heard for the last 18 months, the new normal, which is how do we bring this understanding of these hybrid meetings to these individuals? Like, how are we going to use those Teams devices to bring those forward? Let me take a pause here. I see Matt had a question. Do you have any stats about the percentage of meeting room devices have Bluetooth and presence detection enabled? So great questions. I would say that most, I don't have any stats, any clear stats today about how many have presence detection. It is a feature that can be enabled or disabled depending on the organization. So if there are specific privacy concerns around that, those are conversations that can be had and can be addressed. So I think it'd probably be best if I leave it at that point, but I'm not for sure, significantly on the percentage. So back to our slide here on our hybrid meetings, you can start to see where we're moving forward. It's really kind of having some of that equal footing. And the great thing about Teams devices is that we can meet any size, any type of room. From the nonprofit cat shelter that I talked about earlier that has a shoestring budget, all the way to those executive briefing centers that you've got to have the 8 cameras and they all have to have optical zoom and they have, 5 screens and this one's going to have that presentation and here's the feed of the board of directors in the corner. That's a simul feed. I mean, you can really make that work. And that's really a big takeaway for everyone on the call today. If you can imagine situations, there are probably Teams devices that you can put in place in a modular perspective to answer the bell of those specific needs. All the way from cameras, whether they be kind of a camera that just sits there and, points a certain direction. There are cameras that are ASIC enabled. That means there's almost like some AI or compute intelligence in the camera that can do a wide variety of things. You'll find integrated devices, much like what we call the bar devices. A lot of organizations like Neat and Poly and Logitech make devices like that, or even behind me here, even the Surface Hub types of devices that kind of can do all in one, where all you do is you hang it up on the wall, you hook up power to it, you give it an IP, and you're good to go. All those types of devices and events of those devices can be used in a wide variety of things. But the main thing here is understanding the type of room you want to use these in, and also the type of requirements the room has. So many times so far, we've seen where traditional offices have now become huddle rooms. Open areas have now become open area meeting stand-up gatherings. Lots of different things have changed. And so as you're thinking about where are those areas that you want to be able to tackle, it's just coming down to what are those design requirements for the room? Well, I'll tell you that many of those we've tackled already. So as you reach out or chat with us at Microsoft, ask us. We may have some of those key things already decided and to help you to build that room that you would like to have at your organization. I just see Dawn had a comment here. Discourage video use to bandwidth issues. Great question, Dawn, or a great comment. I appreciate that. There are significant video challenges when it comes to bandwidth that can be perceived, especially for global organizations. I think one thing to definitely reach out to Dawn about that is there are ways to remediate some bandwidth usage. There are ways that you can tune, from a video perspective, as well as there's things that we're doing as well internally to make video as easy to consume from a networking perspective as well. So I would say just keep an open mind there at your organization, because I think there could be some potential answers based on what you see. I will tell you a funny story though. I had a customer once in the African continent that was trying to carry on 50 simultaneous video connections. That's really hard if you know anything about the public internet in Africa. It's not feasible in some places. So there's ways that you can obviously get around that, and there's obviously some restrictions that you may want to be put in place when there's slow WAN links. But again, there are ways that maybe you have maybe a drop-in or maybe a singular point where video is a consumable place, like in a conference room or a specific meeting place at that organization. So a couple of new things here to talk about. I really enjoy these next two slides because I think this is cool. So one thing here is, you know, we've introduced or announced a new thing called coordinated meetings. And what coordinating meetings is when you can have two separate Teams devices that kind of join the same meeting and they kind of know about each other and they allow you to collaborate cross-device. So the easiest example here, excuse me, is we've got a Microsoft Teams room. We've got our display, we can see everyone, but maybe we have a rolling Surface Hub that we share across the organization. Maybe it roams as needed. And we want to bring that Surface Hub in to be a secondary display device, maybe for whiteboard, for multi-input. But we actually can now join those two devices together and really kind of, you know, allow them to work cohesively. One thing that most people say is, well, what, Adam, you know, you have two devices and they both have audio and they both have video. Doesn't that cause the weird feedback effect? And actually, the great thing about that is we've built in technology to make sure that, like, for example, when the Surface Hub joins, that it automatically turns off audio. So you don't have the weird, you know, reverb type of effects in the room. So really, you know, a great area to really maximize the screen real estate. And also, again, helps to make that room a lot more modular and augment that room, because you may not necessarily need that type of Surface Hub in every room, where you want to share it maybe in one wing or one floor of a hallway. All things you can do, and all things that we've seen other organizations do at this time. One other one, this is a really great feature. I have one of these, and unfortunately, it's sitting over there unplugged, or I would have showed it. And that's around our new Teams panels. So if you've ever been in any large organization, you always know when you walk into a conference room, you'll maybe have some of those panels on the wall that it's in use or it's available and you can book the room. In the most basic of functionality, that's what a Teams panel does. But the really cool thing is there's some really neat features here that I just absolutely love. One of them is going to be that room capacity that we talked about earlier. So if you look at the image below, we can actually show that that room is at capacity as we walk up to it. What that means that you can actually go over, the Teams panel can help you find another room that's the same size and actually join that meeting automatically, almost like an overfill room. So that's a really cool opportunity. Instead of making that sad person walk all the way back to their desk and feel lonely, they can now join from a conference room and have a similar experience just in another room. The other one that I think is the best is, and I'm happy to get a show of the raised hands feature here, but how many of you all have been in your organization and you've walked up to a room and it's 12:03 and the other meeting's still happening? Sure, it's gonna be a lot of raised hands on this one. And then you start getting a little knock on the door, and then you kind of open the door a little bit and you look in, and then you're waving through the windows like, hey, we need to meet. You have the whole people in the hallway. Well, we want to obviously avoid the whole people in the hallway scenario. So what you can actually do is come up to the Teams panel and say, hey, you know, this meeting is over and I want to kind of nudge the people in the room. So what you can do, there's actually a button that you can nudge and say, hey, your meeting's over, you need to leave. And they'll get that nice little yellow action banner in their Teams client. And also in the meeting room itself saying, hey, your meeting's over, the next meeting is waiting you for finishing up. So that's a great little nuisance or nudging device that you're allowed to basically tell folks, hey, you should start to wrap up your meeting. We're ready to go. One of the other ones is let's say you're looking for a room to meet. I know that there's a big financial services company that about 3 or 4 years ago decided to take all their conference rooms and divide them by 2 and turn them back into offices. So all of a sudden there's this huge crunch of people trying to find conference rooms, you know, in the organization. They got booked up and you can never find them. Well, now you can walk up to any room and say, hey, help me find the nearby available conference room that I want to be able to book. We'll actually open up a map, a blueprint of your floor, and actually pinpoint to and give you kind of that walking directions of how you need to find that room that's open and available, and how long it's going to be open and available. So if you're looking for this the next 15 minutes, or hey, you need an hour, you can now do that really quickly on Teams panel. So Teams panels, great. I am really excited about seeing these in organizations today. We have 2 companies now, Crestron and Yealink, and I think there's a couple other companies that will also be releasing some in the future, where we'll be able to kind of have those here. And I actually want to place mine outside of my office door here so that my little girls will pay no attention to it. But at least I can say, the red light is on. Please leave daddy alone. So another question was asked earlier. As many of us would like to say, we wish the entire world ran on Teams, but we understand that a lot of organizations, you may work with vendors, or you may have also internally other solutions when it comes to meetings. And so we want to give you the flexibility of joining those meetings from other services. So today we have 2 offerings to join those meetings, not only Zoom meetings, but also WebEx meetings. So let's say, for example, that someone schedules a meeting in your Outlook calendar that's a Zoom meeting, or maybe you're in the Zoom client for a reason and you schedule a Zoom meeting. You can now, if you've invited that room to the meeting, you actually be able to walk in that meeting and see that Zoom meeting or see that WebEx meeting, hit one-touch join, or join from your mobile phone, or join from Cortana, and that meeting will automatically launch the web version or the web RTC client of either Zoom or WebEx, and then allows you to join that meeting. I would say this is one of the great things about the world that we were living in, is that I think all 3 of us in this meeting space want to make sure that we can have the best solutions for our customers. And so just like we're using their APIs, they're also using some of our APIs as well. So I will tell you that if you haven't seen this experience, it does work well when it comes to kind of those traditional audio and video features that you would have. As you start getting the more of the advanced features inside of each of the ecosystems, you're going to start to see a little bit of breakdown. So some things are out there like audio, video, and screen sharing may work fine. When you get into doing raise hands across Zoom to Cisco or Teams to Zoom, there's going to be some things that aren't going to work there. So the best thing to tell you here is, if you are making those meetings, and those meetings are something that you want to be able to attend in those conference rooms, and in audio and video is the most important way to collaborate, this is going to be a great solution for you. So we don't want any of our customers to have to go buy a Zoom room and a Teams device and put them in the same room and have to head scratch. Okay, which HDMI cable goes there? Where's this one go? And I'm using this. Put this off to the side. We just want to have the one device. So having this, I think, is a great thing, and I hope that for a lot of the wranglings that have probably happened between the 3 companies to get this to work and sign all the paperwork, I hope this is what our users will really enjoy, because I know for a lot of folks it was a long time coming to get this type of integration working correctly. Just quick question from Pete here. Can you use a Teams display to show similar information? Available times, upcoming meetings, room attributes. The answer is yes on some of those. You will be able to see some of the rooms, but the Teams display is more of a per person device rather than a per room device, if that makes sense, Pete. So we will be able to see some level of that information. And I think as Teams displays continue to evolve, which they are continuing to do, you'll see even more of those features and functionalities come there. And I also have a special Teams display slide at the very end that, Pete, I'll make it your slide that we'll talk about later. This is, I'm sorry, the primary screen TV in the room. So the display, absolutely, you can use the display, the Teams display, or the TV in the front of the room to use that for that information. I think that's what you're asking, Pete. If not, you can clarify for me and I'll circle back. So final one here is just around secure and scalable. Security is quite a topic. I will tell you there was a new release that I will share here in the chat. I believe it's aka.ms-mtr security. There was a new paper that came out all about MTRs and security. So if this is something that has ever been a conversation at your organization, people saying like, Are these devices secure? What do they do? How do you lock them down? These are very common questions we get. If you go to this short URL, I believe this is the right link. If not, I'll make sure that, I'm sure Michelle knows it off the top of her head, but this is one we want to make sure that we get out there as well. But basically the long and the short of it is, out of the box experience is that these devices are insured and, for security and kind of that lockdown nature right out of the box. So in terms of what you do by bringing that device in, there's a bunch of security measures that are already done on that. We've got things like Credential Guard that, that guards against credential theft. We've got, Rooms apps that are locked down with policies that limit, additional vulnerabilities. And obviously, we're keeping the same type of automatic update cycle for these devices. And I'll show that here on my next slide, but the same type of ways that we would protect, Windows devices, within an ecosystem, you're going to see the same type of methodology used for our team's devices as well. And, all the way from the security portion, all the way through the updates as well. How do we do all that? And we do that right through self-management within the Teams Admin Center. You can see here on our screen, we can get a list and manage all our Teams device settings all in one location. Things like device auto-enrollment is also done in the Teams Admin Center. And any types of kind of call quality analytics can all be bubbled up right from Teams Admin Center as well. So a lot of the traditional ways where, if you remember back even the Skype for Business days, you didn't really always have the best sense that when you deploy devices, where were they? Were they working? Were the microphones turned on? If there was a camera in the room that wasn't working correctly, that came through a support desk ticket. You're now going to get a lot more of that type of metrics and that telemetry coming through Teams Admin Center and around these devices as well. Also, if you have not had a chance to dive in this, definitely take the opportunity. If you have a Teams device or two, put them in pilot, get a chance to kind of see some interesting information that gets to bubble up around Teams devices. You can do a lot more, and I could spend another hour talking about some of the opportunities that you can do within the management within Teams Admin Center for devices today. All right, so I've got a couple of final slides. These are special Minnesota 365 slides coming right for you. So don't just keep this between you and Uncle Adam on all the fun stuff. No, this is stuff that's already known, but I think this is some really interesting stuff. One of which is that we have a new device vendor that has joined our family. That is Neat. You may have heard of Neat. They were the primary vendor for Zoom since basically their inception in Neat joined in 2013, I think it was. And now we're going to be supporting their products as well. The great thing about Neat, just like many of our other vendors that make devices for Teams rooms, is that they all have different types of feature sets to them. So you can see here, Neat has a feature called Symmetry, where you can have just one traditional bar camera, but can start to break down and you can see those individual users. And maybe as users move throughout the room, you'll see that a portion will then follow that user. So now you're getting that true integrated experience. If you have people, depending on where they sit or they're standing, they're getting their own area, their own little postage stamp box to make sure they can, feel part of the meeting. And you're just not looking at just a giant room with, heads that are, 3 millimeters tall on your screen share. So really exciting here. We think Neat's going to be a great place. You can see some of the things that they're making as well around Teams panels and other devices. Definitely check them out with our other vendors as well, but we're really excited about having them on board. Donald actually mentioned very on about fluid components. And what we will tell you is that fluid components are going to be all throughout Teams. I use them today internally across a wide variety of Teams chats and channels. But also one thing to share here is that within Surface Hub, you're now able to take that within Whiteboard and take that fluid component, drop it right into that meeting, and then be able to collaborate in a much more meaningful way right within Whiteboard. And remember, if you haven't seen fluid components, think of it as almost like an individual frame or component, as they would say, that you can interact with in any type of face or plane and be able to actually sync that information appropriately. So if you have a table that you create in the whiteboard, you'll see that maybe in a channel or a chat. You can move that over to Excel, you can move to Word, and still just have that one singular point where that information lives. So really exciting there. You also see that we got some new integrations for PowerPoint Live for Service Hub coming out, as well, again, those video layouts. So like you've heard a lot of times is as we kind of build for kind of that Teams desktop first, devices is kind of a fast follow on the back end. So those video layouts coming to Service Hub as well. And then finally, one of the things that I have been piloting here in my home office is around Teams display. So Pete, this is your slide that I'm coming back to now, is some of the new things about Teams displays. I will tell you, if you've ever seen Teams displays, it kind of felt like a solution looking for a problem, I think is the best way to kind of describe that device. And I think it's found a couple of solution areas. And this one right here is the one that I think I'm probably jazzed most about. So if you live in the world of hot desking, so some organizations, some industries, hot desking is still a pretty big deal. You can now have a Teams display that can sit on the desk. You can have an auto kind of enrollment type of feature for the hot desk for the person. They can log in automatically, and now they can use this as a video device. They can use it as a speakerphone. They can attach a Bluetooth device to it and use that as almost like a, their presence, their endpoint presence, on that desk. So if you have external vendors that come in and you don't want to allow them to bring their laptop or connect internally, or you don't provide guest Wi-Fi for them, but you want to have a device for hot desking, this is a pretty cool device to allow that happen. It does have a 720p camera built in. You'll see it here in its horizontal layout, but also you can turn it vertically and actually see it on almost like a mobile phone type of layout as well. So some really great things coming from Teams devices. If you've looked at these in the past and you thought, those are neat, but I don't know where I'd use them, definitely get a chance to come back and take a look at them a little bit further. There's really a lot of improvement, even from October of last year, on finding the areas where these Teams displays make sense. So I know we're getting close to time here. That is my last slide. I want to thank everyone. If you have any additional questions for me, I'm happy to be here. I think I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle, and I think we're going to take it to the prizes and the giveaways. So Michelle, back to you.
All right, sounds good. We do have a couple people with their hands up, so I don't know if you want to have a couple more questions for
absolutely.
Daniel, if you want to go ahead, and then Ed. Or maybe they're high-fiving you, that could be.
Yes.
Or they just left it up.
That's okay.
Okay. Feel free, if you don't feel comfortable coming off mute, go ahead and ask your question to Adam inside of the chat, and we'll continue on with the survey. Thank you, Adam. That was fantastic, per usual. So I appreciate everything you were able to share with us today. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So if we don't have any more questions, or just if you have them, throw them in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and put the link up to the event survey. So it's mn365.org/survey. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. We usually give about 5-10 minutes for that. So feel free, take your time and fill out, I guess, topics that are related to what you care about, what you want to learn more about. I think as we plan throughout the year of what's coming up, we align to certainly the topics that you put in there. And if there is things that we have recently done, say, hey, I really need to see it again, or I need to see some more in depth on a certain subject, that would be fantastic too. And again, if you are interested in speaking or sponsoring, we encourage you to do that. All right, looks like we might have a comment here.
Yeah, so I just see that here from Chris. Additional information resources about accessibility for hybrid meetings. Chris, great question. I know that there is an accessibility deck that we have at Microsoft. I don't know if it's externally facing. I can follow up. I don't know, Michelle, if you know, I don't know if you've seen it, Michelle, but I'll have to follow up and see if we have that. If so, I'll try to provide a link here in just a moment.
Perfect. All right, hopefully everyone has the URL. I'll go ahead and type it in as well in the chat because I'm going to just showcase what we're doing next month. All right, so our next meetings, as per usual, second Monday of every month. The next one is in September on the 13th, and then October on the 11th, and I hate to say it, but winter's coming. November 8th is the one in November. We will have an admin day per usual. It's going to be the Friday before Thanksgiving, as we've had it the last couple of years. So if you want to do a save the date, certainly you can. I'll have a slide on it next month, so if you can't hear anything I'm saying because you're writing diligently, great feedback to us. That's fine too. But I guess another reminder, it will be for November 19th. That will be our full all-day admin day training where we have workshops that last 90 minutes, usually about 20 of them. So we're really excited for that. We're now securing speakers. So if you are interested in speaking at that engagement as well, please go ahead, submit your name and say, hey, I would like to speak at admin day. And if you have a 90 minutes worth of content, please, bring it, and we'd love to have you share it with the community. And then, of course, next month we have Heather Severino. She is, I'm not even sure if she doesn't have a title. She is an MVP. I believe she's a regional director. She's an MCT, means a Microsoft certified trainer. And if you know anything about her, she is actually a LinkedIn technical trainer. So if you take any LinkedIn courses, chances are you probably have seen something of hers on Microsoft Teams, on OneNote. She really goes through the whole gambit of the M365 products. And then if you've ever been to the Microsoft Technology Center in Edina, you may have had an engagement with Bart Sneary. He is the Dynamics 365 expert in that space, as well as Power Platform. He's going to be talking for 60 minutes on what we're doing with Microsoft Teams and how it's integrated into Microsoft 360 or Dynamics 365. So that's going to be really interesting because there's so much happening. If you haven't been looking at any of the blog posts out there, it's just amazing that the Teams dialer is going to be added inside of Dynamics 365 as an add-in. It's also going to have integration with transcript. So I know a lot of customers I have want transcript that's connected back to the customer so you can read through for the next person to getting engaged with them what was said, what were some of the insights. So pulling out of that would be insights related to the conversation, as well as even semantics. So really, or shall I say, more intelligence as to what they're saying, what they're trying to get from the conversation. So really being able to build off of a more conversational intelligence that you just can't get in a regular Teams meeting. So really great integration coming. So I'm excited for both of those. And then we're looking, of course, for speakers October, November, and then admin day. And so if you have anything open and available that you would like to go ahead and submit for, please do. Just let us know you're interested and we will be happy to reach out to you. So hopefully I've talked enough to pass a little bit of time before giving away our prizes. Let's see, Tim, are you on the line and can take a look at how many have already submitted their survey?
Right now, we currently have 60 responses.
All right, fantastic. And feel free, if you need more time, go ahead and raise your hand so we can just get a count and not let, if we're done, then we're done and we can get everybody out of here. Okay, great. We have a couple of you, so no problem. Go ahead and please take your time. And I know somebody had mentioned in the chat that our Facebook link was not working. I'm not sure if they had put in O365. So remember, it's facebook.com/MN365. And then on Twitter, we're at O365MN. Of course, when we first started a few years back, it was Office 365 user group that quickly had to change. However, we never changed our Twitter tag, our handle. And then, of course, we're on LinkedIn, and you can always reach us at info@mn365.org. And passing a little more time, again, the M365 events. So if you weren't here in the beginning, we're going to try to ensure that as we get more physical.
Hello, good day there. My name is Kyle Vita Lifestyle.
It sounds like somebody's
This is she.
coming off of
I know
mute.
it feels.
There we go. Anyway, as we're getting more in person, we want to push out the events that are happening out there. We haven't had a lot of virtual events happening in the Twin Cities. And so as we see them being physical, we'll go ahead and post them out there. The Branson one, that's really SharePoint focused. Of course, all M365 nowadays. Then the next one being Microsoft 365 Collab, that's in Vegas. SharePoint Fest, that's in DC. I know another one in October is going to be the SharePoint Fest in Dallas, as well as the Enterprise Connect. So that's unified communications, and that will be in Orlando. So a lot of things happening physically. I don't know if that's going to continue to maintain itself. Obviously, we're still virtual. We're not at the Microsoft Technology Center anymore. We, as employees and as customers, are not able to go in until the beginning of October now. So we'll let you know, and we'll always keep you posted when we do go back into a conference room. However, at that point, we know the demand for our virtual meetings, and we will continue to have a hybrid approach, no matter if we're going back in or if we just continue to do virtual. So we'll make it as accessible and available to you as possible. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And if you're not aware, we